Final Fantasy XVI will not be an open world game, and according to a recent interview, the developers at Square Enix are targeting an M rating for the game. There's also just a slew of Yoshi P interviews out there that have revealed a ton of new details about Final Fantasy XVI, so let's break it all down. Famed Square Enix and Final Fantasy producer/director Naoki Yoshida told IGN, "We found in our extensive user research that many of the younger generation of gamers have never played a Final Fantasy or don't have any interest in the series. To create a game that might excite and resonate not only with our core fans, but also with that new generation, we played a lot of games ourselves, and so yes, in Final Fantasy XVI, you'll find inspiration from recent AAA open world RPGs." But then he added, "However, to bring a story that feels like it spans an entire globe and beyond, we decided to avoid an open world design that limits us to a single open world space, and instead focuses on independent area-based game design that can give players a better feel of a truly global scale." It's a shocking yet somewhat refreshing decision, considering it seems like every new single-player game announced these days has to be open world. Or perhaps it's not so shocking, considering Final Fantasy XV took a swing at the open world format and fell a little short. While filled with some really interesting ideas about how to implement an open world in a Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy XV's open world did receive a lot of criticism for being empty and filled with repetitive side quests. Basically the same problem that pretty much every open world game faces. So it sounds like with Final Fantasy XVI, Square Enix wants to play more to the series' strengths this time around, but that doesn't mean they aren't willing to make some big changes. In a separate interview with GameSpot, Yoshida discussed creative setbacks that come up when making a game and trying to adhere to a specific rating. Specifically, he said, "When trying to tell a story with difficult adult themes, these ratings can end up becoming somewhat of a hindrance. And you find yourself changing things that you wanted to do in the game based on that rating. You wanted to show something, but because you have this certain rating that you need to go to, you need to move the camera away. And that ends up making the entire experience feel a little bit cheaper." Now note that most every Final Fantasy game and a majority of Square Enix's catalog has a T for teen or E for everyone rating. As of right now, PEGI, the group who regulates ratings in the EU, has Final Fantasy XVI down as a provisional 18, which is roughly the equivalent to M for mature audiences in the States. The official ESRB rating is still pending, but based on the trailers shown so far and what the game's developers have said, it's very likely to be an M. As far as I know, there are only 2 Final Fantasy games with an M rating. The first is Final Fantasy Zero Type, which was released on PSP back in 2011, and the other is Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, which came out earlier this year. That means that Final Fantasy XVI will be the first mainline Final Fantasy game to have an M rating and be, the first to kind of target a more mature audience, moving away from the broader T or E demographic. Yoshida went on in the GameSpot interview to explain this new direction, saying, "This time, to make sure that we could tell the story that we wanted in the way that we wanted to, we decided to pursue a mature rating in most of the regions that will be releasing the game." Yoshida goes on, "This is not because we simply wanted to make the game more violent or the game more explicit. This is because we felt it was necessary to allow us to explore those more mature themes that the game tackles." And fair enough, a majority of Final Fantasy games feature young adults or teens figuring out their stuff amidst the backdrop of a war or a world-ending conflict. So it makes sense that creatively, you'd want more room to kind of explore those ideas. What that means for Final Fantasy XVI is anyone's guess right now, but we already saw a kid covered in blood in that game's debut trailer, as well as characters alluding to wider spread violence in the second. Others have speculated this might mean we get to see our titular heroes or party members a little bit more exposed. Speaking of party members, if you haven't heard yet, Final Fantasy XVI's main protagonist Clive looks like he's going to be the only playable character in the game, while party members will be fully driven by AI. Yoshida, who's clearly been making the rounds, elaborated on this in a recent interview with GamesRadar, saying these characters will play big roles in the story and have their own arcs themselves. And so it's not just basically having someone help you in battle, it's having party members participating in Clive's journey. This particular decision may have something to do with the game's new focus on combat mechanics featuring summons, or icons as they're being called in Final Fantasy XVI. It's been confirmed that players will at times actually play as an icon in real time to battle other icons. Unlike in previous Final Fantasy games where you would summon Shiva or Bahamut or Ifrit, in Final Fantasy XVI, it appears that these beings are tied somehow directly to individuals referred to as dominants who can then call on their power. So based on what I've seen so far and kind of what I've read and gathered from the trailers and things, I don't think that means that specific characters are tied or locked to one specific summon or icon. I think what it means is that dominants have the ability to access or channel the power of icons, but then if they like channel too much or like lose control, then that's when the icon like really comes out. That's just my guess for now. They've still been fairly tight-lipped about kind of the story events and how all of that stuff works. However, Game Informer did talk to Yoshida about combat, and they have a pretty good rundown about how things work when you play as Clive in a more standard situation, you know, cycling through different icon abilities, as well as descriptions of how icon versus icon battles work and how they are completely different mechanically based on which icons are fighting each other. It actually sounds pretty interesting, and that Square Enix was willing to give up a series mainstay like a party system indicates that we are probably about to witness something new and special for the franchise. Luckily, the game is nearly finished. Well, it's still set to come out next summer, so a year away. But in a recent Q&A on the official PlayStation blog, Yoshida said, right now, the game is fully playable from start to finish. However, he added that they still need to record a ton of VO for multiple languages, balance the game for difficulty, add finishing touches to the cutscenes, and finish a full-scale debugging process. So still plenty left to do, but take solace in the fact that Final Fantasy XVI seems like it's in a pretty good place. I'm not even gonna mention the D word. Yeah, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. All right, that's gonna do it for today. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling about Final Fantasy XVI. And for more video game news and updates, stay tuned right here to Inside Gaming.